I'm Sienna, and today in Victoria we held the Achievements and Challenges seminar hosted by the Australian Council for Student Voice. It was an incredible event. It was so amazing to hear everybody's presentations and the incredible questions that the audience had for them as well. We did attempt to film the entire thing for you, but unfortunately the camera did cut out partway through. But we've put together some of the best parts of today, and I hope you enjoyed.
Me speak before. I previously was at Mount Waverley Secondary College, where I led student voice and agency there for about 7 years and transformed what was a pretty traditional student leadership situation with kids putting up flags and speaking at assembly into what became a real culture or ecology of student voice and agency at the school, where students were regularly giving feedback to teachers on their teaching and also contributing to lots of different aspects of the school, including teaching and learning, wellbeing, etc. You can Google that, so if you want to, I haven't got videos for you today, but if you go onto YouTube and you look at Mount Matters or Teach the Teacher for Mount Waverley Secondary College, you can see videos of the work that I did there. So when I was speaking at the 2019, students' mums speaking at the 2019 conference, it was the end of 2019, so we had no idea what was to come in 2020, and we were asked what are the emerging challenges and the achievements, and I remember the kids came up in the Rosanna presentation about time being a constant challenge, but really where we were at that point was that the school had done a lot outside of the classroom around student voice and agency, but the reality was that particularly for secondary students, they spend most of their day inside classrooms and they spend most of their day with many different teachers, so having different experiences in different classrooms. And when they come to completing the Attitudes to School survey, which is a survey that's done once a year for the older primary school kids would know about that, they're making judgments based on their experiences at school, and they're trying to think of all of their teachers, as a collective. So that is a real challenge in a secondary context. It's a little bit more contained in a primary context, I think, because primary students have one main teacher who you spend most of your time with. So that data that comes back from secondary schools is a little bit harder to identify, why the students might be feeling a certain way because they're in so many different classes. So I'll just explain what happened in my journey since then, briefly. It's not about me, but it will help you to understand. 2020 and 2021 I taught in lockdown, so I had mostly VCE classes, and I was still obviously leading student voice and agency, and at that time teachers really had to let go. So prior to lockdown, there's that fear that increasing student voice or student agency in some way diminishes teacher voice or teacher agency or teacher control. That's always a challenge when you're trying to increase student agency in a school context. That it can be quite threatening to teachers to think that, well, the kids are going to have all this power now, so what about me, and what does that mean for me as a teacher? But we saw in lockdown that teachers had to let go of some of that responsibility because they couldn't see what was happening on the other side of the computer screen all the time. So I won't go into lockdown too much, we were all there, we all experienced that, that was a wild ride. In 2022, I stepped into a new job in the Department of Education, which allowed me to go and see lots of different schools, primary schools as well as secondary schools, and private schools and Catholic schools and obviously government schools as well. And I was there to be looking at maths and maths learning and teaching, but obviously with my student voice hat on, I was really, really keen to see what was happening in different schools and different age groups and different parts of Victoria as well, so regional and rural as well as metro, very fancy private schools as well as the complete opposite of that. And what I saw when I visited schools was the same thing, that students fundamentally want to learn, teachers mostly really, really want to help their students to learn, and that students just want to know that the person who's in front of them, whoever it is, cares about them and will help them to learn. So really that does come down to students having a voice, not necessarily just through student leadership and SRCs, every student in the entire school feeling that they have a voice, which is a real challenge. So when we look at achievements and challenges, that is an ongoing challenge. How are we making sure that our neurodivergent students have ways that they can express their voice if they don't like speaking publicly, for example. They don't want to be in an SRC. What about students who are new to the country and actually don't have the language skills to express their own voice? So it's okay to say, oh, anyone's welcome to go for a student leadership position. Some students just don't want to be in student leadership, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't have a voice as well. So I guess I'm sort of focusing on more of the challenges, and I don't have any of the solutions, so sorry, I'm just spruiking challenges here. I saw Emma has lots of nice notes. This is my coffee receipt from this morning, and just jotted down a few things so I didn't forget. I guess one of the opportunities, I would say, moving out of COVID, and now I'm in a new school, which is a beautiful, beautiful school. I've landed in absolute heaven. Now that we're out of COVID, the Framework for Improving Student Outcomes, which the students might not know about, it's called FISO, it's got a full name, guys, and all the adults in the room would know about that, has changed, and now it is learning and wellbeing at the centre, and student voice is not sitting as a separate entity, whereas in the last sort of iteration of that, student voice was in there, it was present in our school strategic plans and our annual implementation plans, and all schools were focusing on student voice, but it was sitting as sort of separate to the other components of that framework. And what I like about FISO 2.0 is that it's not, because it's not separate, because it is really it's meant to be embedded in all of the other work that we're doing. So I would say that for schools who are looking to enhance student voice or do more student voice, it's not about adding more on to what you're already doing in your school. Schools are really, really busy places, and we don't have time to do more and more and more without taking something away. It's about looking for opportunities in the work that you are doing to incorporate student voice in a non-tokenistic way. So not dumping students on interview panels when you're not actually going to listen to what they say anyway. Not inviting them to a staff meeting and then shooing them away so you can actually start a proper staff meeting. But actually involving them where there are opportunities to involve them. So examples would be that if you are making a change at school, before you announce the change, let's say you're changing the timetable, for example, different times a day. I know Mentone did that, but I wasn't there for that, and I was thinking in my previous school. In my previous school, they did that, and they didn't communicate it with the school community until it was done, and then the students had things to say about it. Like, hang on a second, I usually drop my little siblings up school, that's not going to work for me, how I go to school, that kind of thing. Silly example. Something more important might be around the process for exams. So if you have an exam timetable, show the kids and get feedback, or better off, build it with them. If you're looking at improving numeracy strategies in your school, which we all are if you're a department school, ask the kids. Why don't you ask them to be involved, not just for feedback on, how's maths going, but ask them to be part of building the plan. And what I've learned through all of my work in this area is that the students do have the capacity to be involved in these things. They're not too young. Even the little ones are not too young. They might not have the language that they need yet, and the first time they're involved in something like that, it might feel really awkward and a bit sort of like you're concocting this thing, but the more that you do it, and the more that the students actually know that you will listen to them and involve them and you're taking what they say seriously, the more it will breed more of that student voice and authentic sort of student voice in the school. And to the adults, I guess I'm saying this, get different kids, not just the students who put their hand up for everything, not just the students who go apply for student leadership. Sometimes it actually takes an adult in the school to go to a student and say, I think you'd be great for this opportunity and I will help you. You don't, if they're afraid of public speaking, you don't need to do public speaking, I will help you prepare. They're kids, so they need to learn how to do these things. There's some research that came out of Cambridge, it's a few years old now, but it was, for anyone who wants to reference, I can find it later, but it was around getting feedback from students and the challenges around that. And the research found that the first time you do it, if you haven't done it for a long time, it can be quite negative. The feedback that comes from the students can be quite aggressive and negative. And the research found that that was the case because the students have all this pent up, I've wanted to say this since I was in grade 4 and my teacher did this to me, I'm finally getting a voice. If you do it again and again a couple of times and the students can see that you're actually listening to, you're you're not just taking what they say as gospel and, I want a water slide from that building to that building. It's not that kind of feedback, but you're actually listening to what they say and their experience, and you're interested in working with them to improve things. The more you do that, the more they will actually contribute in a positive way, and that's what we saw at Mount Waverley. So Mount Matters is worth looking at if you're interested. Mount Matters was student-led focus groups, where we trained up the student leaders, and the whole program was led by students, and it was students leading focus groups for other students, which then that information and the feedback got fed back to the relevant person in the school. So it might have gone to the head of senior school, or it might have gone to the head of curriculum, or it might have gone to the head of wellbeing. Sometimes those staff members were invited into the session, but they didn't run the sessions. The sessions were run by the students, and all students in the school knew that they had a voice at Mount Matters. I'll just touch a little bit on student feedback surveys. So a big part of the work that we did at Mount Waverley, and I say we because it was very, very much student-led. I just unlocked the door at lunchtimes and supervised, but the students really led this work. You can find it if you Google Teach the Teacher Mount Waverley, but essentially it is a VIC SRC initiative, so thank you VIC SRCers in the room. Our students came back from a Congress camp, they heard about Teach the Teacher, and then it is student-led professional learning for teachers. And you don't just dump kids in front of a staff meeting or in front of a PL session and say, like, teach the teacher something. It took months and months to prepare professional learning sessions where the students collected feedback from students at the school and from teachers as well across the whole school, and they identified an area that they wanted to focus on to improve at the school. And way back in 2015, that area was student feedback to teachers. We had a lot of feedback going the other way, teachers to students, but there was no formal avenue for students to give feedback to teachers. It was happening in some classes, but in some classes it absolutely wasn't. So the students did a lot of research on feedback. Essentially, John Hattie and feedback and effect size was all the rage back then. Still kind of is, but it very much was then. And the students planned a professional learning session for the teachers based on John Hattie's research around feedback and how important feedback is. And the teachers in the session were like, yeah, feedback's so important we give them feedback. And then the students were like, okay, what about, is it important that as teachers you get feedback? And they actually worked with the teachers to develop a survey that could be used. They literally co-constructed the survey. And that took about a year. So they, in that session or those sessions that followed, they made survey questions, they put together draft surveys. That was almost to roll that out across a large multi-campus school with almost 2,000 kids in 2 campuses in a pretty traditional school environment. There was a lot of resistance to that, and it was mostly fear. So obviously the teachers didn't have any fundamental objection to the kid having an opinion, but it was some teachers were quite threatened by the idea of students being able to even rate teachers. So we spent a lot of time working with that. The survey results only went to the teacher. We explained the whole process to the teachers and the students very, very clearly and multiple times so that everyone was clear around the purpose of the survey. It wasn't so that you could say, I hate Miss Dureau's shoes, or she yells at me when I'm late to class every single lesson or anything like that. It was about learning and how the student felt in that class. And then we spent a couple of years, this was not quick work, we spent a couple of years then embedding that process into our PLC structure. So for the grown-ups, but also the kids, PLCs are professional learning communities, so it's meetings that teachers have where they look at student work or student data, and they talk about how they can improve things for students. So we didn't want the survey thing to be happening on the side. We wanted it to be part of that process. Just on the survey thing, it worked. It took a couple of years, but it absolutely, when I say it worked, it became part of the school culture, that students knew that they had a way that they could communicate their experience and give feedback to the teacher, that the teacher would look at, and that the teachers were looking at it. And they knew that because they could see changes happening in their classrooms. They also knew that the teacher couldn't read all of this feedback and make all of these changes overnight. They also knew that the feedback was often quite contradictory to the teachers. So you might get half your class saying you love group work and half the class saying you hate group work, and how do you do that? So it was about the teachers going back into those classrooms and explaining, this is the feedback that I got, not with kids' names there, anonymous. and this is what I'm going to target on this particular part of my teaching, and I'll ask you in a week or ask you in 2 weeks, you know, how that's going. So the conversation was something that the students were also involved in. There were a whole lot of challenges with that, obviously. I'm just giving myself a couple of minutes notice here. There are a few challenges with that, more than a few. I'm doing my doctorate on it. So that is one thing that, you know, you go and present about this and people say, where's the evidence? So I'm currently doing my doctorate looking at this very topic, and hope to do this creation of a survey at another school and actually properly document it and look at the impact that it has in a school environment, in a secondary school environment. But as part of that, I've done a lot of reading on the use of student feedback surveys as part of my literature review, which is like a thing you need to write. You need to read lots before you do research. So there are a few real problems with student feedback surveys. Students get over it. They get survey fatigue, particularly if they don't think the teacher is looking at the data. So if they are just doing survey after survey after survey after survey and they can't see anything changing in their classes, like just 3s the whole way down. Why am I even bothering? So that the students need to know that the information is actually being looked at. And then they will give you the best feedback you've ever had, because no one knows what it's like in your class better than the kids in your class. The teachers get really sometimes confused about how to actually act on the feedback. So sometimes it's very unclear to them what they could possibly do to improve in a certain area. And sometimes it's quite demoralising getting feedback that's not great as well. So there needs to be appropriate supports in place in schools. And there's also a teacher shortage, so we don't want to upset teachers anymore. We want to support teachers and make sure that they feel empowered and they have a voice in their school as well in terms of improving their practice. There's lots of other challenges, but I'm just aware of the time, so I might not talk for too much longer, but I would say that I'll just finish up on one thing. Student feedback surveys are really great. It is not great when they are implemented in schools without all of the work that happens before the survey being conducted. And that means communicating, as I said, very, very clearly with students and staff and getting buy-in from the whole school community about when the surveys are happening, what the purpose of the survey is, how the data will be used. Because if you skip that step and you just go bang and roll out surveys, it doesn't work well for kids or teachers, and it can end up being a real waste of time. So that would be my little note to finish on, but well done to Rosanna, and it was awesome seeing what you guys are doing, and yes, hopefully we'll see you in another 4 years, and hopefully there's no pandemic between now and then. So thanks very much, everyone. Initially I was really upset by that. Like, you think, come on, like, how can you not see the value in this? But I had to learn that every little bit of resistance was just fear. The teachers were just feeling threatened. They were worried, you know, is this surveillance? Like, where is this information going? Can the leadership see what the kids are saying about me? Often they knew that the kids might say something kind of negative because they knew deep down, like, I'm not very nice to that year 8 class or whatever it might be. But it was really about, you know, we absolutely had resistance. Involving the kids in explaining it to the teachers was really important, because they were far more convincing than a member of the leadership team getting up and telling the teachers that all of a sudden the kids are giving them feedback. But the reality is it's really deeply personal when you get feedback from teachers. And again, I was chatting some teachers at the break, but when we first rolled out the survey, I did the survey with a Year 11 maths class, and a student wrote stuff in the survey about me. And most of the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Like, I surveyed 5 classes and 124 kids thought I was, you know, the best thing since sliced bread. And one kid said, I think the wording was, she has an attitude problem, right? In the survey. And I was leading the whole thing, and I was so devastated. Like, I knew who the student was. It wasn't anonymous. We had the option of making it anonymous or not. And I was like, this kid Simon fans. And I was like, what have I done to this kid? Like, what on earth? He'd be like 25 now, don't worry about it. But it actually ended up being the best thing. Once I calmed down, I went and spoke to Simon, and I was like, this really surprised me. I'm so sorry. Like, what have I done? And it was because I planned a class and the projector wasn't working the day before the survey, and I got all flustered in the class. You know, you've got to get through your content, my projector's not working, and I was frustrated, and that had really stressed him out. And we had this conversation where I was like, I never would have known that I had never thought about that a teacher being flustered in a class could stress out the student in the class. And particularly him, like, just a normal, kid. And I just didn't even think about it. So I thanked him and said, thank you for making me aware of that. I've been teaching for 15 years. I've never thought of that before. I taught that kid the next year. I taught Simon in year 12. And our relationship was great. And he, everything was fine after that. So I like to use that when explaining it. It's a little example, but it's any bit of feedback. When you're in a classroom, you are so vulnerable and you are exposing your personality and your life to these kids, and so any little bit of feedback that's not super positive is really difficult to hear. But usually there is an underlying reason that the student is giving you that feedback. So it's about supporting, leadership supporting the teachers and teachers supporting one another, so that you can actually tap into why is that kid saying they don't like my class? What do I need to do to make sure that they love it?
Do you still have any, I suppose, monitoring system, might not be the right term, but ways to make sure that this feedback was being implemented so students weren't just giving it forward and then going my teachers?
Yes, very good question. So I've said it a few times, it took years. In the first year, it was getting the teachers to do the survey. And that meant training some teachers how to use a Google form, because it was a Google form that they copied and then they sent out, and some teachers didn't even know how to do that. So it was very technical at the start. And then once people were using it, it was that problem. They're doing the survey and then they're ticking off in their performance development plan that they've done the survey because they had to do it, but are they actually looking at the data like you're saying? So they need time. Teachers actually can't just be doing this in their own time. Teachers don't have time. There's a list of a million things they need to do, and looking at that data is probably never going to be at the top. Planning my class that's next is probably at the top. And so they need allocated time. They also need to be able to look at that feedback with a trusted peer. They can't be expected to sit there with their boss and look at the data. It's very scary and intimidating. So we ran, as I said, we put it into our PLC session, essentially staff meetings, and we made a template that had all the survey data questions, and then, PMI, plus minus interesting, we've all done, it was PR plus interesting action. And so I could look at the data with my friend Wendy, who teaches music and I'm maths. We didn't need to be, we're buddies, so I trust Wendy. And look at the data and go, oh yeah, positives, this is what my kid said. Oh, I was a bit interested by this. But your kids said, they rated you really highly in that area, what are you doing in your class? And then it was that kind of learning, okay, maybe I'll try it in last column action. What can I try? So it did require structures around the teachers, and it took a while to get them actually doing it, but then it worked. Then it meant the teachers actually had to bring their data to the meeting and actually had to look at it and put something in place.
So you mentioned that some students struggle with expressing themselves, especially for those who have language barriers or new to the country. So I'd like to hear how you encourage them to raise their voice, especially for the students who come from a collective cultural background.
Yeah, and there were a lot of them, thanks Alice. There were a lot of students of that background, Mount Waverley, 30% of students who speak, English is not their first language, it's a lot. So voice isn't just verbal voice. We made sure there were opportunities for them, in Mount Matters sessions. Obviously, we made sure there was a decent representation of students who were EAL background, and giving them opportunities to write things down and also go away and think about things, have a chance to go away and think and come back to the next session, and they could provide it in written format or creating a safer space where they felt okay to try and talk more, where they weren't hurried and it didn't matter if they were stumbling on their words a little bit. So we were intentional about that. I'll come to you first and then I'll come back to you.
Thank you. My question would be, as well as the other two systems that everyone does, and a lot, I think with leadership, that's where reactionary, so we get a survey and reaction implementing. So I was really curious to figure out how you do your preparation phase before the survey.
Yeah, good question. Well, being at a new school this year, we wanted the message to be really consistent to all of the students. So we made a video that was short and was played before the students actually did the survey. And every class from 7 to 12 watched the video before they actually did the survey. And it was just a short explanation about, why is the survey? You've most likely done it before if you've been in government school. This is how we use it. We're really clear. We actually look at this data and we're measured against it for our implementation plan, our strategic plan. The teachers look at it in meetings, like we explained, and then the students did the survey. So other mentoring girls might be able to explain that, whether that had an impact. But at my previous school, I had the experience where we get the data. Data that wasn't good, we didn't want to show anyone. Sorry, that's not me. I wasn't in that collective week. And then just kind of bury that. And then next year, do the survey and be shocked when the data didn't change. So I think it's really important, even if the data isn't great, to involve the students in those discussions. Like, we've noticed this is low. What do you think we could do to improve it? Yeah, but being very transparent. Same with NAPLAN. I mean, we're not talking about NAPLAN, but like, the kids need to know why they're doing this NAPLAN test. Otherwise, they're just sitting there going D-A, B, dad, B-A, D, dad, bad. I did that as a kid. I didn't know why I was doing the test. So yeah, it's really important to be transparent, and that's what I'd say about it.
Were any teachers against your idea of the survey?
Yeah, lots of them. Not lots. Some were, but they were just a bit worried about it. They were just a bit worried about getting bad feedback. Was the main thing, yeah. But we worked with them. We made them feel comfortable.
What about
Hey, you've been so quiet. Go.
I have about 50 questions, so I'll try and fit them all into one.
Go.
So did you talk with fellow, so when you got feedback from whoever the signing guy was, did you talk with teachers about that, or did you just make it yourself? Have you seen changes in other classrooms? And my last one is, have you also seen any changes that you haven't liked?
Such a good question. I'm going to go to the changes in the classroom one. Yes, and I would love to show you lots of videos of the students at Mount Waverley. But what I did in 2021, it was a COVID year, 2020 or 2021, we actually asked, we put the call out to the whole student body and said, if you would like to feature in this video, we just want you to film yourself responding to these questions. And it was, have you noticed a teacher change their practice, change their teaching based on student feedback that they've had through the survey? And then we got all these little snippets of videos from kids in different year levels, and we made a video. I'm not very good at making videos, but I learned how to do it. And overwhelmingly, like, when you hear it from the students' perspective, it was incredibly powerful. So it depended on the subject and the year level, obviously, but kids were saying, my teacher did this survey, she came back and explained to us that she's focusing on this. We noticed in the class that she was trying that. Then, we gave her more feedback. So the kids were aware of what the teacher was trying to improve. I think that's important, that the students know that Miss Dureau is trying to improve the way she runs group work or something in the class. Yeah. And I think another thing that I didn't mention earlier, we worked with primary schools as well. So we worked with Mount Waverley North Primary, and in 2019 we ran mini Mount Adders, and we sent our Mount Adders reps up to train up grade 6s. And then they became the Mount Adders reps, Mount Adders leaders up at Mount Waverley North Primary. And the next year, which was 2020, we tried to start and then it got absolutely smashed. But in 2021, we did mini Mount Adders. So when we got back to school, we had mini Mount Adders was 3s to 6s, and mini Mount Adders was reps to grade 2s. So it can be done in a primary school setting as well. Yeah. Yes.
When you told the teachers that were sort of like against the survey, did they understand and then like were on board with it, or did they stay the exact same as they were?
Yeah, such a good question. Eventually, people got on board because teachers they're not opposed to like students having an opinion about things. That's not the problem. It's that they're worried about their job. That's what it's coming from, a place of fear. So one thing we did do was have the students talk to the teachers about the survey. Like, we really love doing these surveys because You know, it means that we feel like we can have a say in the class environment. We want to give you positive feedback. So we made sure that it was framed in a positive way, rather than we're rating you out of 10 and we're going to, you know, it's like Survivor and you're going to be voted off the island. Like, it wasn't like that. So a lot of time and effort needs to go into working with the resistant teachers. Yeah.
So I'm just going to jump in here again. Thank you so much. Another round of incredible questions.